I said to Sally when she asked me to come and say a few words after dinner, I said, no, that's a very, very bad idea because I'm not funny at all. So I'm sorry about that, because you really need lightening up, and you've had a fabulous long day, very technical day, so you're not going to have a very technical evening. If you want to fall asleep, by all means don't worry about that. I think the world of CIEEM, and I know a lot of members of your organisation, and I think probably as President of the Landscape Institute, I'm really, really keen on the messages I've got back from Sally and her colleagues about collaboration, and that's certainly my big message really, is that divided we'll definitely fall. We're all in the same industry, we all really want to deliver the same thing in terms of public goods. And so my big message is we have got to behave differently. The landscape profession, I'm making myself pretty unpopular at the moment. I've only been in post for 3 months. And I'm absolutely insisting that every commission, the first question is how can we improve the biological quality of this place? So every commission, and that I hope will involve you guys in collaborating, because they don't have the scientific skills and they jolly well need them. So that's my big message. As it is an after dinner thing, I thought I'd just show a few images, so no words, but just a few images. I had a completely spoiled childhood. And it's interesting how childhood sometimes defines you. Well, I spent half my life of my childhood in the Usambara Mountains in Tanzania, which is where I went to school, and here, and I just wonder, there's one person who knows where this is, but I just wonder whether anybody else recognises where this is, with a wreck like that in front of, actually this is where I lived, Sullivan House. This is Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands. And this is a wreck that I used to fish from and watch logger ducks and amazing. I mean, the wildlife was just stunning. The sea life was quite amazing. And one of my introductions actually to you guys was, I remember literally, it was 60 years ago, do I dare admit that, I was left in charge for a very short while with one of these flip nets over a freshwater scrape with this guy who was trying to catch these flightless duck, the logger duck, for Slimbridge, for Peter Scott's Slimbridge. So that, was it really that long ago? And that was really an introduction really to human intervention and understanding wildlife. So I've been passionate about wildlife all my life. So this is a little story, and if you can bear with me with this little story, it sort of gives, there's a sort of message at the end of it really, it's a question. Now I doubt whether many of you like zoos. I've actually been a trustee of Marwell Zoo for the last 15 years and chairman of its Education and Conservation Board. And we have the breeding books for the Simmons-horned oryx. We also deal with the Grevy zebra and the red-legged ostrich. And we're working in Tunisia and Kenya in particular. And this is really a conservation story. So the Simmons-horned oryx, we've had a very long relationship with the Tunisian government. And you can imagine, actually, the reintroduction where species have been completely annihilated for all sorts of reasons, not just climate change, but overgrazing, the removement of deserts, and of course the competition with domestic animals. And we had gone to great lengths to reintroduce this herd, and you can well imagine that this was all about really working with the government, making sure that a sufficient area of land, and it's massive by the way, to sustain new herds of introduced species like the silver-torn oryx. But we hadn't really bargained for what happened next. And we went out to, I wasn't involved by the way, went out to monitor the herd, and this is the remnants of the herd. And we had a witness of what actually happened. This plane landed, unloaded 3 jeeps with machine guns, literally in seconds annihilated the herd, and this is cling film and bako foil residue left from the carving up of every part of the animal that was loaded up into planes and disappeared. So we clearly hadn't got that right. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make really is that, and by the way, Marwell also produces sand lizards for reintroduction into European lowland heath. But you guys, won't like this stuff, but actually we are going to have to start thinking about reintroduction. And that has to be about soil biodiversity just as much as it is about things that the public can really understand. We are going to have to intervene. I mean, the state of our biological quality now is so tragically low. And I mean, I'm absolutely certain you're all deeply emotional about what has happened to species and habitats. And it really is time that we struck back. So have we got the skills, and are we really bringing zoos back in to make sure that actually we do have the capability, the scientific capability of reintroductions? And I'm not just talking about these sort of beasts, as I said, I'm talking about microorganisms as well. And so that brings me back very neatly to the Institute, the Landscape Institute. We're about the same size as CIEEM, and I would really like to see us collaborating more. I'm really enormously grateful to your Director of Policy and your Chief Executive, where we synchronised responses to the Environmental Audit Select Committee. If you remember, that was a committee looking at CAP reform and what's going to replace it. We really need to work hard at that, because that's a moment in time. That $3 billion of public investment is going to disappear, so we need to make sure it's secure and delivering what we all know needs to be delivered. So I am saying to my profession, landscape profession, you have really got to start taking biological quality much more seriously. It's got to be absolutely the starting point in every transformation commission that you are given as a profession. And we've got to make it relevant, haven't we? We've really got to make that connection between what the goods that are valued in society. And I'm extremely worried about the disconnect between young people and natural systems. And if we don't get that right now, we're going to have generations of people who have no connection whatsoever with natural systems. And that is very, very, very serious. It's a terrible thing to tell you, but if you look at the child population in this country at the moment, 40% of child population in this country, their only ongoing experience of the external environment is in the schoolyard. And if you think about the sterility of the schoolyard, you can see how serious that really is. So we're going to have to reconnect, and the latest thing is natural capital. And I was sharing a platform with Dieter Helm, who terrified me, I have to admit, who is the chairman of the Natural Capital Committee. It's a committee of the Treasury, actually, and he quite blatantly admitted that he had briefed the last 4 chancellors of the Exchequer. And I think we're going to have to look very closely at this guy and what his committee is doing, he leaked to me that there's going to be a Natural Capital Act, and indeed he will be producing some form of toolkit, his committee, before Christmas. And he leaked before it was announced, and you've probably now seen the announcement. They're not pilots, they're pioneers. Manchester on urban natural capital, Devon on landscape natural capital, Cumbria on catchment natural capital, and I can't now remember the marine site of Suffolk and Devon, Norfolk. But we need to watch this. Now, if he really does mean business, if he really is going to deliver this in the way that we would all like it delivered, and let's be frank, this is your language, then things will massively change. And he's very, very optimistic, pinning his hopes, of course, on the 25-year environment plan, which he said, of course, will happen because it is a Conservative Party manifesto commitment, and with a president, Prime Minister who hasn't actually been elected, she's going to pursue that manifesto commitment. But it'll be interesting to see what actually emerges. So getting on the issue about children, Sally and I worked together many years ago on setting up the Nottingham Landscapes Trust, which actually set about changing government policy on school grounds to try to reconnect young people with natural systems, to adapt landscapes for experiential learning. A very high proportion of children learn better, their learning preference is experiential learning, and indeed you can deliver most of the national curriculum through the landscape. And if you think about the connections with natural systems and the whole issues about play and the whole issues about social sciences and social development, we really do need to have a different attitude to children, and we could do a lot together on this. One of the projects that this little trust has secured is pollination, and I'm sorry about the spelling there, but pollination, this is about 500 schools where the schools are being equipped. It's a collaborative partnership with a number of organisations, 500 schools where they are actually surveying for every life stage of invertebrates, the eggs, the larvae, pupae and adult stages, directed very much at pollinating insects, looking both at the school grounds and indeed the immediate community. And their plans over 3 or 4 years will be to transform those landscapes to be much more friendly to pollinating insects. So we need to do much more of this. I would like to see DEFRA now pick up the lessons we learn and do something very much more seriously about pollinating insects. Well, Brexit, and I'm sorry about the quote there, it's not a quote. When I say Brexit, I mean Brexit gives opportunities and threats. The landscape is, that I'm showing there, is attractive but lethal. So Brexit, of course we are all very concerned about whether they're going to dismantle European directives. My view is that that's not what people voted for. And indeed, I think we ought to just remind everybody that actually most of the European directives were written by us Brits. That is a fact. I'm more optimistic that the legislation will remain intact. They will have a great difficulty in changing it, in my view. And certainly it does give us an opportunity to have a vision for our countryside, which frankly DEFRA has really given away to Europe for the last 50 years. So it's an opportunity for the first time for us to really have a vision for the multifunctional countryside that we all aspire to. This landscape, I talk about it being attractive but lethal. This is the middle of the South Downs National Park. And it just demonstrates the worst possible behaviour of the farming industry. All the woods here are not being managed at all. Of course, everything is dead. Slug pellets kill everything, as you well know, everything. So this is a landscape devoid of any biological quality whatsoever. More serious, of course, is to sustain anything, because the soil is completely abused. It's lifeless, no structure, no organic matter, carbon's gone, certainly it's devoid of any microorganisms. Pouring nitrates onto this land, so you've got nitrates, of course, coming from natural gas. 25% of those nitrates are finding their way into the aquifers. And if you go from Portsmouth, in my part of the country, all the way through to Brighton, all the water companies are now importing water to dilute the drinking water. It's called blending. And the other 25%, of course, goes off in nitrous oxide, which is 100 times worse than carbon in terms of climate change gases. So this is really serious. And the phosphates, you probably know all this, they're having a devastating impact on our rivers because it affects the viscosity of the water, so that the fly eggs, do not adhere to river weed. And so all the great fishing rivers in Hampshire now are devoid of flies, and it is really very, very serious indeed. So it's really dysfunctional. You say, well, they must be making a profit out of this, but if you read DEFRA's figures on this sort of landscape, 51% of this is public investment. The profits on 51% is public investment. 6% diversification, and 43% is the sale of grain. So it's profoundly dysfunctional in terms of business. And we all have our examples of good practice. This is a friend of mine called Henry Evans. He has exactly the same landscape as the one before. He has a shallow soil over chalk, but he does know the carbon content of his soil. He has a private water company. He is really attentive to water quality, and particularly nitrates in his aquifers. But he, of course, doesn't put a grain of nitrogen on his land. He, as you can quite guess, uses an integrated crop management system to fix nitrogen. And the great thing, he uses Hampshire sandfoin amongst others. The great thing about that technique is it's not as mobile as granular nitrates. And in fact, I know this because the Environment Agency, bless them, have done some excellent work on mapping the movement of nitrogen fixing. Well, as a result, I mean, this is a farm that is teeming with wildlife. So the use of Hampshire sandfoin alone, he has 18 out of the 23 species of British bumblebee on his farm. 18 species. I don't know how many of you know the horned robber fly. You won't be, it's very scarce now. You can actually walk through clouds of them on his farm. Clouds of them. I counted 35 brown hare in one field. He is absolutely attentive to the biodiversity of his farm. It is the basis upon which his business makes any form of profit. And so we need people, and you can all quote, can't you, I'm sure around this room, similar people to people like Henry. But we really must make more of people like Henry, because there are one or two examples of best practice, but nobody's really listening to them. The NFU hate him, absolutely hate him. I mean, he's his own worst enemy. He does upset the NFU too, but we win. So just staying on the point about the countryside, I'm a great admirer of Natural England, and that's not because I sat on the board. I think Natural England are in an incredibly difficult position. They have stuck their head above the parapet on more than one occasion, and I'm a great believer in the natural character areas. You will remember it was originally worked by English Nature and the Countryside Agency pre-Natural England. And for me, that is the framework for setting the agenda at a landscape scale and for marshalling public intervention and delivery. And I'm really keen to be pushing that argument. The slide on the picture on the right, that shows two things. One, the brown lines are DEFRA's administrative boundary for the environment, 25-year environment plan. I just wonder whether this is a pointer. It might be. No, that's the wrong thing to do. Sorry, now how do I... Can somebody help?
Press the same button again.
Press the same button?
Yep.
Brilliant! How did you know that? Okay, I won't try to point out.
The top button.
The top one.
The top button, yes.
Oh yeah, you can't see that though, can you? Okay, the brown lines on this map here are the boundaries that DEFRA are proposing for the 25-year environment plan, but they totally ignore national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty. Now they already have statutory management plans for those landscapes, but of course there's no statutory obligation on anybody to do anything about them. So it is a complete waste of a perfectly sound administrative system. 23% of the country is already covered by statutory management plans. Now, if those plans articulated national policy as well as local policies, they could certainly use a little clause in the NERC Act to actually have delegation of public investment into the environment plan for this country. So we are challenging DEFRA and saying, come on, make better use of those administrations and think about using the joint character map as being the framework for delivery. So we're in a period of change. I've never known so much international, let alone national, political turmoil. And we are going to have to work collaboratively really very hard to get real change, and real change is something we must get. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to say a few words. I hope I haven't bored you. You've been terribly patient. Thank you very much.